Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. And today we have a special presentation from ACCAP, the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Preparedness. And we have a few speakers from ACCAP all going to give us some quick overviews of a little bit about what they do at ACCAP, which is, well, I'll let them tell you a little bit more about it. But it actually, I think, aligns very well with what IARPC aims to do in many ways. And so we thought this would be a nice opportunity to hear a little bit from ACCAP about their work in Alaska. And then at a future webinar, we'll actually have some IARPC representatives join an ACCAP webinar and talk with ACCAP a little bit about what IARPC does. So this is a webinar that's been in the works for a little while, and I'm glad we could have it today. And Rick Thoman is going to start us off, and he is an Alaska climate specialist at ACCAP and has just worked for many years to, I think, to do a lot of the weather activities that we've all been to many of his webinars, probably learning about weather-related Alaska events. So I'll let Rick take it away and start us off and talk a little bit about what ACCAP is, and then we'll go through all of our wonderful presenters today. Thank you again for joining.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Liz. And Bree, if you could share your screen, we'll start the ball down the track. All right, there we are. Thanks very much, Bree. Okay, so yeah, thanks very much to IARPC folks for having us here today. I will be kicking us off here. Both our director and deputy director, Sarah Trainer and Nathan Kettle, are scrambling on a tight deadline work right now. So I have been voluntold to pinch hit here for you. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Next slide. All right, so here's our kind of our ACCAP overview and our vision, our mission statement here, some building healthy and thriving Alaska communities, economies, and ecosystem in a changing environment. And I'm sure everyone on this call is acutely aware that the environment, the climate, and the Earth system is changing very rapidly in Alaska and as it is all around the Arctic. So ACCAP is one of about a dozen NOAA-funded regional integrated science and assessment programs. We are located at the University of Alaska Fairbanks on Trothyetha, the traditional and never ceded lands of the Tanana Dene people. ACCAP is not the oldest of the existing RISA programs, but it's one of them. We have been working in Alaska since 2006, so coming up here on our 20th anniversary. And you know, how do we work to make our mission statement happen of building thriving communities and economies and ecosystems in this very rapidly changing environment, and that we do that through connecting Alaska-specific weather and climate science with all kinds of folks who are making decisions. We do that through applied research, communication, and this is important, sustained partnerships. ACCAP's 20-year history is one of the most important assets that we have. Next. So to do this, we are collaborating with tribes and tribal organizations, communities, state and federal agencies, local municipalities, researchers all around the state, and we provide them with information in the form of data interpretation, tools, webinars, all kinds of resources that help people get the information so that they can make a better informed decision about whether it's extreme events or long-term change. And our focus areas there include community resilient extreme events, capacity building, that outreach and engagement which feeds into and supports all of the other pieces, and of course, sustained assessment. Next. So here is our, this is the front page here on the ACCAP website there, and you can see our focus areas there. There's links to there. Also from the front page, you can get to things like our upcoming webinars. You want to see a webinar that we did in 2019, you can get to that too. We've got a whole section of hundreds of climate graphics related to Alaska available right from the front page there. So again, we try to make this stuff available in as many ways as we reasonably can. Next. So, at the top of the show here, Sarah Traynor has been with ACCAP since the beginning. In the first round of ACCAP, first 5-year cycle, she was the program manager, and since then she has been the director. And as such, oversees ACCAP is of course just one of her things in her portfolio as a professor here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So she deals with the things like the strategic planning, budget, admin, the really the less glamorous but the things that have to be done. And then Bree Dar is our new program manager. She's driving the slides today. And as all of you on the call know, the ACCAP, the program manager in almost every organization is the unsung hero that holds everything together and which we cannot do without. And so we're really happy that Bree has joined us just this spring. Next. So that's the quick overview. So now we're going to transition into lightning talks. And first up is going to be Nathan Kettle. And since Nathan can't be here, I will go through his slides. Next. Nathan Kettle, as I mentioned, he is our deputy director. He has been with ACCAP in one role or another for 14 years now. He is by training a geographer, and his current focus areas for ACCAP are actionable science evaluation, extreme events, impacts. And here's just a list of some of the projects that he's working on for ACCAP right now. Interesting one is supporting avalanche forecasting and management, climate and traditional foods, and how that has potentially varied over time in Southwest Alaska. And the one that we're going to highlight here is the subseasonal to seasonal forecasting work with the National Weather Service in Alaska. Next. So this seasonal to subseasonal sea ice and wind project. So this was a funded project from the National Weather Service, and the driver of this was really the Weather Service in Alaska for decades has had a sea ice program, including both analysis and a short-term forecast program. But historically, the focus was basically always on the ice edge and supporting commercial activities, including fishing, barge operations, that kind of thing. So once the ice edge got beyond a particular place, historically the Weather Service ice program was not too concerned about that. However, Weather Service wanted to be able to provide more ice information to communities in northern and western Alaska. So the Weather Service came to ACCAP as a boundary spanning organization. We have a lot of contacts and we have the expertise to kind of help the Weather Service get together with the right people to be able to help them meet their interests in providing improved ice services for rural Alaska communities. So Nathan was the ACCAP lead on this, And so the idea here, engage people that have the lived experience in the region. Project focused on, in the end, two communities, Utqiagvik and Kotzebue. Originally, we had hoped to be able to include a third community, but that didn't work out so well. And so, focusing on those two communities, the importance of sea ice, changes in sea ice, the day-to-day use of sea ice during the appropriate seasons, really important. Next. So after meeting with folks in both Utqiagvik and Kotzebue and partnering with the Alaska and Arctic Observatory and Knowledge Hub, AOK, uh, talking to AOK, talking to experts, hunters, elders in those two communities, here's what it came down to. As you might expect, people in the communities know everything about their local conditions. And for sea ice, what elders and hunters really wanted to know was forecasts of wind conditions. Like many places in the Arctic, tell people the winds, give them an accurate weather forecast, and they, from their lived experience, can tell a lot about specific things that are important to them, including sea ice. Now, through a series of meetings, both larger meetings and interviews, what came out was that the wind is the critical driver. That is the one thing. If they get one thing, tell them the wind. Nobody cares about percent chance of precipitation tomorrow, but they want to know the wind. Turns out, I might not have expected this, but people prefer numerical wind forecasts over qualitative. So 20 miles an hour instead of breezy. And you can see things, other things that folks wanted, including changes, that's important, and confidence. Now, communicating this information, it's one thing to be able to pull whatever the folks want out of some source, say a weather model or a set of weather models, but how do we communicate that? And what means do we use to communicate that? So people in Utqiagvik and Kotzebue expressed great desire for these forecasts to use local place names, local terminology, local language, and put them out in ways that people can get to them. Don't just slap this up on a website. So Facebook is widely used in rural Alaska as a means of communication. Of course, radio is still widely used. And then being able to make that a two-way process. And so observations from experts in the community feeding back into the Weather Service to be used in forecasting. And this little picture here on the right-hand side, this is kind of a fun one. This was a meeting in the fall of 2024, and as part of that, folks had arranged a tour of the Anchorage forecast office in Sand Lake there. And this was supposed to be a 45-minute tour. And the folks from the communities that were in this were so excited about this. We wound up being there for 3 hours. It was really a quite the day. And all of this, of course, informed the Weather Service developing this prototype 10-day wind forecast that could be delivered to the communities. Next. Oh, let's see. We're time for Rick Tolman now. Okay, so I am here. So yes, I've been with ACCAP for 8 years. Prior to that, I worked for more than 30 years with the National Weather Service Alaska region. Although I have been collaborating with ACCAP since the earliest days, since the very beginning of ACCAP. Yeah, I've been getting my paycheck from them for 8 years, but really I've been involved nearly the whole time. So I've got more than 40 years experience in Alaska and with Alaska and Arctic weather and climate. And within the ACAP umbrella, my focus areas are really outreach and engagement, and what I see as twinned with that, the science communications portion of what we do. But to me, we have them as separate things there on our little program areas, but to me, they're really closely intertwined. Next. So, how do I do that? Well, I think one of the most important things that I do is I'm there. I do and have been doing for years weekly climate highlight spots on you can see there in Dillingham, Nome, Bethel, Fairbanks that gets rebroadcast all through the interior. It's not that I have some amazing climate highlight every single week, but rather I'm there when so you know so I'm a known name and ACAP becomes a known quantity. So when stuff happens, not calling up a stranger, not emailing a stranger, but rather a group that is already known just by showing up. So whether it's the weekly radio spots, the climate column in the Nome Nugget newspaper, I go to quite a few Alaska specific conferences and meetings all around the state. Of course, one of my favorite is Western Alaska Interdisciplinary Science Conference, which is held in Western Alaska. Really important to show up. And of course, I'm a contributor to ACAP webinars and have been for many years. Next. And then the science communication part. Another hat I wear is as editor or contributor to many high-profile reports. So Alaska's Changing Environment and Alaska's Changing Wildfire and Environment, kind of our flagship products here at the International Arctic Research Center, and ACAP have been extremely well received. And we know that this is getting use. We have seen graphics from these products used in classrooms, used in legislative hearings. I also work as one of the editors for NOAA's Arctic Report Card and the American Meteorological Association's bulletin, State of the Climate issue every year as one of the editors of the Arctic chapter. And of course, coming with the job, I wind up being talking to a lot of media, traditional media, social media, where I have a weather and climate presence for Alaska and the Arctic, and that this is all part of that communications, getting accurate information about what's happening in the Arctic out there. Next up is Adelheid Herman. So you get to stop listening to me. Take it away, Ad.
Thank you, Rick. Hello, everyone. I'm Adelheid Herman. I've been with ACAP for 5 years. I came in as a postdoc and moved from postdoc to senior research professional in November of 2025, and also a co-investigator with the core team. And my areas of expertise are climate adaptation and resilience, community engagement, workforce and economic development, fiscal pathways. It's a grant funded by another entity within within the NOAA Climate Program Office, and Caroline will talk more about that later. And then small grants. Crystal will talk more about that later. And I'm going to turn off my video. And next slide, please. So this is what I'll be talking to you about today. This project, Building Capacity of Rural Communities to Respond and Adapt to Climate Change, focusing workforce development within tribal adaptation and mitigation planning. Dr. Sarah Trainer, our executive director, is the principal investigator and working with us. And we had Greta Goto, who worked on the literature search, and Caroline Erickson, who worked diligently on all aspects of the project. And now we'll have Eleanor Greenbaum, who will continue working with ACAP. Next slide, please. This was a poster that Caroline and I had developed for an AGU meeting. The project goals of this project aims to help academic and other institutions, including federal and state agencies, understand the challenges rural Alaska tribes face in developing a workforce that can support climate adaptation and mitigation planning and implementation. It also provides tribes with tools to incorporate workforce development into their climate adaptation and mitigation plans. And another part of the project is reviewing existing climate curriculum that can help build capacity in rural Alaska. And for the local capacity piece, this is crucial for climate adaptation and mitigation planning, but there's workforce shortages that pose a significant challenge. And also, these challenges are further complicated by the overlapping roles of tribal, municipal, state, and federal governments in some communities. And with the workforce needs, rural Alaska faces ongoing infrastructure needs, often relying on an imported workforce. And local communities aim to shift this narrative by offering training at universities and regional training centers. And with climate change damaging buildings, homes, and infrastructure, there's a need for workers to rebuild as well as to manage grants for climate adaptation plans. A workforce development plan and communication system is needed to connect employers with the existing or potential workforce. And then in trying to define workforce development, it's an evolving field, including its definition. And one definition in the literature that best fits this project is what you see here. Workforce development is the coordination of public and private sector policies and programs that provides individuals with the opportunity for a sustainable livelihood and helps organizations achieve exemplary goals consistent with the societal context. And we took that from Jacobson Hawley report. And so while this is a solid starting point, we learned this definition needs refinement to better describe workforce development in rural and tribal Alaska communities, which often involves cultural and social aspects of life, community well-being, resilience, self-sufficiency, elder and youth involvement in addressing historical and systemic barriers. And with the literature search, Greta examined the academic literature and the gray literature, and the gray literature aligned more closely with a holistic view. And for Indigenous people, workforce development extends beyond the individual to community and social aspects of workforce development. Next slide, please. And so this is like a holistic model in practice, and it applies to the Bristol Bay region. So I've been attending the Bristol Bay Workforce Development Consortium's meetings held throughout the year, and it brings together all of what we call the BBs, the Bristol Bay Native Corporation, Bristol Bay Native Association, Bristol Bay Area Health Corporation, Bristol Bay Economic Development Corporation, and other entities throughout the region, including employers, but that's somewhat lacking so far. And then in addition, all 4 school districts are brought in under the umbrella of the Bristol Bay Region's Career and Technical Education Program. And so in this consortium, there are lots of internship opportunities, culture camps, dual credit, and so on. And this is truly a workforce development model at its best, especially for the sharing of information between groups in the consortia. And then we occasionally bring in outside groups to present to us on their programs. Next slide, please. And this is something that BBNC shared with Greta Godo and I. We wanted to show some information here about some of the Bristol Bay region's industries and what the region has determined are their education and certificate programs. And as you can see, climate is not mentioned in here, but if you look at all the priorities, all of these fields are needed if you're going to approach climate change holistically and acknowledging that climate affects everything. Next slide, please. And these are some of our next steps. And so since individuals, workforce development programs, employers, and educational systems are all intertwined, the context here really matters. The project team is continuing to refine a workforce development definition for geared towards the Alaska context. and we'll be offering information on including health and well-being into climate adaptation planning to help sustain resilience within communities. We will be producing usable products for communities, and the measuring of outcomes helps us track progress mainly through the evaluation process. So Kuyana, and I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Quincy, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Shojit Crystal Jivashenko Kutsanithli. My name is Crystal Welker, and I'm the engagement specialist for ACCAP. I have been with ACCAP for about 15 months, and I'm based in my homelands of Arctic Village, Alaska. I'm a PhD student in the Indigenous Studies program at UAF, and my background is in Indigenous wellness and well-being. And much of my ACCAP work focuses on engagement and community adaptation. A large part of my role is building relationships and strengthening connections between ACCAP and communities across Alaska, in particular tribal and rural communities. So today I want to briefly share two projects that I've been working on, the ACCAP Small Grants Program and the ACCAP Engagement Strategic Plan. Although these are different projects, both focus on relationship building, supporting community priorities, and strengthening partnerships throughout Alaska. And one of my projects I support is ACCAP Small Grants Program. And the goal of this program is to provide funding to regional nonprofit organizations that are already serving Alaska communities and addressing local needs. The program helps build support resilience and preparedness by supporting local leadership and creating opportunities for mutual learning. Another important objective is increasing access to climate information that is relevant, understandable, and useful for communities. Through these grants, organizations are able to connect climate information with local priorities in ways that are meaningful, actionable, and for people they serve. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the original Small Grants Award, and through this program, ACCAP provided funding to several regional organizations that are deeply connected to the communities they serve. And these organizations are leading projects that address local priorities related to climate adaptation, resilience, and community well-being. And one of the things I really appreciate most about this program is that it recognizes the expertise that already exists within communities rather than bringing solutions into communities. The program supports organizations that are already doing important work and create opportunities for collaboration, relationship building, and shared learning across Alaska. Next slide, please. Building on the success of the original awards, ACCAP also provided extension funding to support continued work and momentum within these projects. The extension award allowed organizations to expand existing efforts, strengthen partnerships, and continue delivering activities that communities found valuable and impactful. In many cases, the additional support helped organizations deepen community engagement and continue responding to evolving climate and resilient needs. And for me, one of the most rewarding parts of supporting this program has been seeing the creativity and the leadership and commitment with our partners. These extension awards reflect ACCAP's commitment to investing in long-term relationships and supporting community-driven adaptation efforts across Alaska. Next slide, please. In addition to supporting the Small Grants Program, I have also been leading the development of ACCAP's Engagement Strategic Plan. And the purpose of this plan is to provide an ongoing framework for engagement activities and opportunities that can guide ACCAP's future work. A key focus is identifying spaces where stronger tribal and rural connections are needed and exploring opportunities to build relationships, partnerships, and collaboration. To help inform this work, I've interviewed ACAP team members to better understand current engagement efforts and their strengths and the challenges and future opportunities. And this diagram on the slide represents the approach that emerged from those conversations. Listen, connect, collaborate, support, and adapt. We begin by listening to communities and partners to better understand their priorities, needs, and strengths. From there, we build connections and relationships that create opportunities for collaboration. Through this collaboration, ACAP can provide support by sharing resources, information, and partnerships. As communities and conditions change, we adapt our approaches and continue learning together. This process helps strengthen relationships, identify any gaps and opportunities for engagement, and support meaningful networking and partnerships and guide future engagement priorities. Whether through the Small Grants Program or the Engagement Strategic Plan, my work does focus on building on these relationships. Masicho, and thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline and I'm a research assistant here at ACCAP and I've been with the team for 3 years now, or almost about 3 years now. I have a background in environmental science and public health, and some of the key projects that I work on are fiscal pathways, which I'm going to talk a little bit about here, and workforce development and small grants. So thank you to Crystal and Adelheid for already running through those. Next slide, please. So the objective of the Fiscal Pathways project, our main question is how can state and federal funding and technical assistance programs more effectively support rural communities and tribal governments in accessing financial support for climate resilience, adaptation, and mitigation planning in Alaska? And so through this question, we kind of are getting at something where we want to better help connect tribes, communities, rural communities with funding, and what are the barriers and gaps to that. So next slide, please. And so I'm just going to run through a little bit of the activities that we've been doing so far and what this project has looked like from our end. So in 2023, we started project planning and development. And in 2024, we began interviews with tribes, tribal consortia, and federal agencies. And these interviews were anywhere from about 30 to 60 minutes. And we connected, I think, around just shy of 20. And through these interviews, we really were trying to get to the heart of barriers that folks faced on either side to creating an effective and useful funding system for everyone involved. In 2025, we continued the interviews. We, after learning a lot from these interviews, had a workshop with the goal of bringing people together to talk about some of these funding issues and talk about how we can best approach funding. And this workshop was hosted in May in Dillingham, Alaska. And at the end of 2025, we gave a presentation at AGU, and the project officially ended in 2025. And now we're wrapping up some of the analysis. So we're doing a qualitative analysis on some of these interview transcripts. We're creating a story map. We're hoping to develop a journal, and we're doing all of this as part of outreach about the project to share back any information that we've learned that could be helpful for our communities. Next slide, please. And so this is just a poster that we developed for AGU. It kind of just goes through what the overview of the project is. It shares our research question, some of our goals, an overview of the interviews, what we covered at the workshop. This workshop was really cool. We had a model, which was called a project accelerator model, and it allowed folks to kind of take a project idea and move it forward in a way that they could create a proposal and kind of go after funding for their community. And some of those topics were on erosion, infrastructure, wildfire, and food security. And then, sort of as we're wrapping this project up, we've come away with a few takeaways that are still preliminary as we're finishing up some of our analysis. But folks really were stressing the importance of programs like the AFN navigators and federal fund navigators, dedicated people that can help walk through some of the challenges of the grant application process and finding grants that work for communities. A strong highlight and focus on the importance of peer networks and trusted people where you can learn about opportunities or learn to navigate a challenging system, and also highlight the importance of flexible funding and flexible funding agencies or working with folks who understand challenges in these systems. And I think that's about all for me. And so I will pass it over to Ed.
Great, thanks, Caroline. Appreciate it. Well, I am Ed Plum, and I'm the ACCAP Weather and Flood Hazard Specialist, and I've been with ACCAP for just a little over a year now. And but similar to Rick, before coming to ACCAP, I'd engaged with folks at ACCAP on various projects over the years. And that's because I worked for the National Weather Service just downstairs from ACCAP as a meteorologist and hydrologist for about 30 years and retired last year. So I'm kind of following the footsteps of Rick. He retired from our office, the Weather Service, and then I've retired and come to ACCAP following him. So my focus with ACCAP is on kind of tapping into my background with the Weather Service. So extreme events, weather and forecasting, river and coastal flooding, and community preparedness. Some of the key projects that I'm working on, I took over the ACCAP webinar series, and I'm going to go into that in a couple slides here. And then also I'm helping to populate our weather and climate highlights tool, and I'll show a slide about that. And some future work that we're looking into doing here with ACCAP is some extreme event preparedness exercises. Next slide, please. It sounds like some folks in the audience may be familiar with our ACCAP webinars, but we do offer several webinars each month. We have, as I mentioned, I organize and facilitate these now, and so I try to find speakers. We do have some recurring webinars, and one of those is Rick Tolman's monthly Alaska Weather Climate Outlook. And so those are every third Friday of the month. So feel free to tune in if you want to know what weather has occurred in the past month or so and what's upcoming in the next couple months across Alaska. And he often sometimes touches on the Arctic as well. We also have a variety of topical webinars that we have at least one every month, from environmental change to community engagement to emergency preparedness or extreme events. Have a variety. So if you go to our webpage, I'll have the link on the next slide, but you can see the past webinars. As Rick mentioned, you can go back to webinars many, many years back and kind of see what we've done, because we've got them recorded and available on our website. And next slide. So I wanted to highlight a few of our upcoming webinars. I think Rick, you just dropped the link in the chat there. That's great. Thank you. You can see in July, August, and September, we've got Rick's weekly or monthly climate webinars, but then we have a few other ones coming up. We actually have somebody from the U.S. Arctic Observation Network. They're going to be talking about Arctic observations and how they're helping with coastal resilience across Alaska. And then one coming up in August is going to be about an event that occurred last August. If you haven't heard about a large landslide that occurred in Tracy Arm down in southeast Alaska, created one of the second highest tsunamis on record, which washed a wave up about 1,500 feet on the opposite side of the fjord, and that wave raced down Tracy Arm. So that's going to be a really cool one. And then in September, we have one on winter rain in interior Alaska. And this is some work that one of our Alaska fellows did over this past winter and spring. And I'm going to highlight that here at the end of our lightning talks. And then we are going to host the IARPIC, date to be determined and topic to be determined, but that will likely be in September. Next slide, please. We also put out a monthly newsletter, and I think somebody dropped that in the chat, but if you go to our just main webpage, you scroll to the bottom, you can sign up to the web form there. And then there's a direct link here. I'll drop that in the chat. But that'll give you, we only send it out once a month. It'll highlight webinars and upcoming events and any other work that ACCAP is doing that we'd like to highlight. Okay, next slide, please. And I'm dropping that in the chat. There's a direct link to the webinars. As I mentioned, I'm helping to populate this weather and climate highlight tool. So this is a GIS-based database where it goes back to events back to 2007 up to the present, and includes a variety of information. You can see all these little icons on this image here. So from fires to snowflakes to lightning bolts to thermometers. And so it's an archive of max min temperatures for different locations, record temperatures, record rainfall, extreme cold events, significant fires and things like that. And so I clicked on one of the thermometers here. I can hardly read without glasses, but I know what it says. This is from from July 2023, and it's highlighting in Northway, Alaska, near the ACCAP border, that they reached 88 degrees, which was their record high for that day on July 7th. But it also tied the record high for the month of July. So just little bits of information like that from around Alaska and also on our coastal waters across Alaska. And I'll drop that link into the chat as well. Oops, I think I did drop it in there. And next slide, please. And then just some future work that we're looking into. This kind of taps into some of the work I'd done in my previous career at the Weather Service. And this is working with emergency managers and the National Weather Service and other organizations to develop tabletop exercises and workshops based on an extreme event. And so if you're not familiar with a tabletop exercise, this is where you have a scenario of like a flood, bring a bunch of people together and go through the scenario and see how different organizations and agencies respond to that event. So it's a good way to meet other people and their operations and what their responsibilities are, and also to understand where there may be gaps in sort of community preparedness and things like that. And so that is one thing that ACCAP we're going to be looking at getting involved with in the future. Okay, next slide. So you probably saw through some of these slides that we've gone through, we've got really nice graphics and reports and things like that. So we did have a science communicator, and they have since gone to a new position just a month or so ago. So that position is vacant, but our science communicator creates a bunch of graphics, outreach materials, and does community engagement, and really takes the science and makes it visually appealing and easy for people to digest. And so they'll work on the web pages and as I mentioned, outreach materials and things like that. So you can go to the next slide, please. So here's just some examples of what our science communicator has produced in the past. I just want to highlight one thing here. So you can see different reports. And then in the middle, it says Arctic sea ice. So this is actually a magnet, and it's a look at the Arctic sea ice extent over the last century. So each stripe represents 1 year, and years that are kind of the beige color are years with more ice across the Arctic. And then years with the purple color are years with less ice. So you can visually see for the last century, the extent of Arctic ice has been decreasing. And then this is a sticker, a climate stripe sticker. So the blue are the colder years. So it's an average temperature over the year, each column. So you can see different cold years are blue, and then the warmer years are the darker red. And so you can see from 1900, and this sticker goes up to 2023. You can see as years are warming through time over the last century. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it over to Zav. It's all yours, Zav.
Thank you, Ed. Hey, I'm Zav Grabinski. I'm here in Fairbanks, Alaska, where I grew up. I'm the geospatial analyst and data visualization specialist. I like bringing really complex data, natural processes, ecosystem data, forests, into simpler terms to broaden the reach of the research, to help people understand, the complex processes that are happening in the Arctic and Alaska. I've been with ACCAP for over 3 years now, but I've been collaborating with them for quite a bit longer, pretty much ever since I joined the Alaska Fire Science Consortium, who's a partner organization with ACCAP. That org is also led by Sarah Trainer, who's one of our co-PIs. Um, so my background is in wildfire, processing large data sets. And then before I transitioned into analyst role, I was a science communication specialist, which I really enjoyed, and it kind of helped me bridge the gap between technical research and then sharing my results with a lot of people, which I find very valuable. Some of the projects I've been working on lately are this massive project in the Yukon Delta. That's an interdisciplinary project. I provide the climate analysis over the last 60 years, and then we're working with a collaborator who's studying indigenous food diets in the area, and we're looking for links between climate and then diet changes over the last 80 years. So I really like kind of expanding into new areas. I'm a bit of a generalist and have a strong background in climate and wildfire and landscape, but I really have enjoyed kind of expanding my reach into sea ice and drought and precipitation. Another project I've been working on is analyzing the weather station data availability in Alaska. We've gotten some feedback that there's been a lack of reliable data in rural communities, and we've seen kind of a decline over the last 10 years. And so I've worked to kind of quantify this so we know it's more than just kind of a sentiment that this is actually happening. And another product that I spend a lot of time with is the Alaska's Changing Environment series, specifically Alaska's Changing Wildfire Environment, which I was the lead author of. And so I really enjoy kind of taking these processes like wildfire that have been on the landscape for a long time and kind of helping folks see how they've changed with a rapidly changing climate in Alaska. Next slide. So here are just two examples of some of the graphics I helped create for the Alaska's Changing series. I really like making maps. When there's a request for a map within ACCAP or within a IARC, they often send it to me. And so, yeah, here on the right, we have a map of wildfire, and this is a way to visualize, just how many fires have occurred in Alaska across the last 20 years. Then it's probably a little small on this screen, but, when you have the publication in your hand, you can kind of look at these smaller maps which show the extent of wildfire over the last 20 years, and you can just see, wildfire has been in Alaska for a huge extent, ever since we've been monitoring them. But the size and the reach is really expanding, and some of these fire scars really stand out. Like in the North Slope, we have the Anatupic River fire, which is just like this massive fire where we've never had fire before. So I think there's certain visualizations, lots of products that can really help folks kind of understand, how climate is changing without having to kind of over explain or make it like a fear thing. It's just, this is what we've seen on the landscape in the past, and now we're seeing it in a new way here. Similarly, on the left, sea ice is really an important thing in Alaska, and we've seen, really rapid change. So this map on the left, we have this kind of turquoise blend between the deep blue and the light blue, and that's where sea ice has receded over the last 40 years. Next slide. And so, yeah, I kind of view myself as a intermediary between like a really focused researcher and a science communicator. So I can do some of the high level research, I can do some of the, visualization and the outputs, but then if I can span the gaps and then like help a focused science communicator and a focused researcher work with each other, I think that's where I really excel. But I enjoy making things like web apps, story maps. This graphic on the right is for a story map I made in the Southeast, kind of communicating just how much precipitation some of these areas in Southeast Alaska get, and it's a lot. And then working collaboratively to build like big projects like this wildfire walk. I was one of the designers for this. I hope some of you have seen it, but if not, across from the large animal research station on Yankovich Road, there's this 10-slide interpretive panel that goes into a burn scar that we had 5 years ago, and it's quite the sight. So definitely take a look. And then yes, Alaska's Changing Wildfire Environment series. That's something I've really enjoyed working on. Yeah, I'll let the next presenter go. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's Rick Tolman. I'm back with you. I am not Anjali Shaw. She is out enjoying summer this week. So, Anjali is an employee actually of the Alaska Fellows Program, which is a program that brings recent graduates to Alaska to work with specific nonprofit or academic institutions. Anjali came to us from Brown University, and she has a background in earth science and mathematics, so kind of a quantitative standpoint. But her focus with ACCAP was to help us to expand our extreme events library, and she just did a fantastic job with this. Next slide. So the Extreme Events Library now consists of 24 documents, soon to be 25. This was actually we started this back in 2023, 24. Caroline Erickson was the first Alaska Fellow to really get this off the ground, and a lot of what this looks like is due to Caroline's work. Then Anjali has picked that up, and this is just an example of how this looks. You can see there's a wealth of information here. We try to make it as accessible as possible. What happened, and in particular, what were the impacts? That's really the focus of this Extreme Events Library. It's focused on impacts, not meteorological extremes per se, or climate extremes per se, but rather what are the impacts on communities. And the whole idea here is to basically to be able to create a one-stop shop, particularly for events in the past where it can be very difficult to find information about them, scattered all over the place. And of course, stuff that's pre-internet or even more than 10 years old can be really difficult to find that info. Next. This is just a map showing the kinds of events that we have in the library now, and where they're at. We've strived to produce these extreme events entries in the library, which are available as PDFs or as web pages all around the state. Obviously, some type of extreme events are regionally specific, like landslides in Southeast. Coastal flooding, of course, is a coastal thing. But we've tried to include everyone, and when Anjali gets back, we'll be adding a dot there over the Pribilof Islands for the 25th Extreme Event Library entry. Next. So here's just a subset of the 24 that we have up now, and this just gives you a flavor of the kinds of things that we have. The QR code there actually will take you right to the Extreme Events Library. Again, a great resource for past events. So please reach out for that. And then next. And then as part of Anjali's work here, she also was able to participate in going to conferences, staffing our tables. She got to go with me to Nome in October and actually talk to people. And she actually recorded video and added that local people's perspectives on their experiences with coastal flooding storms in Nome. So we tried to provide our Alaska Fellows with a really rich experience while they're with us. I think with that, I will turn it over to Eleanor, and who will actually be Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I know we've got 1 minute left. I will highlight Eleanor's work very quickly. So Eleanor worked with Anjali. She was one of the our second Alaska fellows, person that was here with ACCAP. And Eleanor worked on a couple different projects, but she comes from a background in foreign and domestic environmental policy. And I'll go right into her projects, though, if you go to the next slide. So the first thing she did was an internal network mapping exercise where she was designed to help ACCAP for us to better understand the landscape of organizations that are working with extreme events across Alaska. So the goal was to identify who's doing the work, where their priorities align with ACCAP's, and what opportunities exist for ACCAP to develop new partnerships and collaboration. So to develop the map, she reviewed conference presentations, conference panels, reviewing work from various organizations and what they're doing, looked at a variety of papers, and then also worked with the Alaska chapter of the National Climate Assessment. And this is the networking map she came up with, and kind of links how everybody's tied together working on extreme events. Right in the middle, the Geophysical Institute, the GI, UAF, and then IARC are all right in the middle there. If you go to the next slide. And then one other thing she worked on was the development of a policy brief to synthesize information about winter rain event impacts in interior Alaska to be used by decision makers across all sectors, including transportation, emergency management, utilities, etc. So she interviewed 27 stakeholders to better understand the impacts from winter rain events, and really focused on a big event that happened a few years ago in Fairbanks called Ice-Mageddon event. And this information is being used by emergency management in the Fairbanks North Star Borough as they update their hazard mitigation plan. So her work has been really relevant and is being used in real time by decision makers. Sorry that was so brief. You can go to the next slide. I know we're over a minute here, and I know we didn't leave any time for questions, but if there's anybody else still on that would like to ask questions, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate hearing all the different research. And I think even though we're at the end of the hour today, we will have more time when we join ACCAP. And I think we'll try to keep our talks even shorter so we have more kind of joint time together. But I do want to see if there's any questions in the audience first. If there's anyone that can stick around for a few minutes, we could do a few questions. I didn't see anything come up in the chat during the webinar either, but I'm going to have questions as we have our next webinar. Just thinking about, as I'm hearing about all of the different pieces of ACCAP, I really like the kind of the regional focused efforts that you all have, and how you have these like small grants and getting to go to different communities and work there. Whereas I think IARPIC in a lot of ways, this is kind of bringing federal agencies together, but we do also have community members who are on our different collaboration teams and who help to lead those teams as well, and some state folks as well. But it's making me kind of think about, are there ways that we can kind of better connect with some local things based on what you're doing, but then also are there ways that maybe we can provide some kind of broader information that might be helpful for ACCAP or something like that? Or are there data sets maybe that we can kind of share with ACCAP that we've learned about or have access to that maybe would be helpful? I don't know. I'm just thinking about different ways that IARPIC and ACCAP might be able to share data or talk more about different things. I don't know. And I think we could continue that discussion in our next webinar too. I wondered if any of you had any initial thoughts on that as we get our webinar together to give to you and kind of think about some of those questions too.
Elizabeth, I'm wondering about the work that IARPIC might be doing on like a whole of government approach and what that would mean to like on the ground rural tribal communities.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I think, about IARPIC is it's a collection of team members that are already, their agencies are already doing work, or we know of people who are doing work, and IARPIC is trying to help to coordinate those efforts, or at least understand those different efforts. So IARPIC itself isn't necessarily doing research per se, but we're just our team members are making sure we understand what research is happening already. And so, for example, I work at NASA. I'm a contractor there, but we've had this large scale campaign over the last 10 years to better understand environmental changes. And so in Alaska and Western Canada as well. And we've kind of had people on the ground, and we've had airborne measurements, and of course, satellite data. And so we have this collection of data products and resources that we're now trying to kind of make sure get incorporated back, even at the community level. And we're developing some booklets and informational informational material that we can share back at the community level. And so I think there are other people who are doing that as well, and other research teams that are doing that. So it's kind of, IARPIC is just making sure that everyone knows about those different activities. But I think making sure it's getting back to the community level is really important, which is one of the reasons I thought having these two webinars between ACCAP and IARPIC would be a really nice series. And our archive of talks on our IARPIC has many different researchers who've talked about permafrost and kind of these NASA efforts, but also USGS efforts. We had a really nice talk about it was like all about berries last year. And we learned about kind of some of the berry resources that people have had, and subsistence resources, that kind of thing. There's a lot going on. It's more than I can even remember or think of right now.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think it'll be helpful to have a presentation to outline both the scope of the work being done within IARPICS, or the focus areas, but also like, yeah, where we sit in kind of the broader Arctic research space, because I think that can be maybe a little confusing for folks who are like new to IARPIC, or like understanding like how do we actually function? Yeah, if we're not a funding body, if we're not performing research ourselves, like as a coordinating body, like what are we doing? So I think that presentation will be very helpful.
Yeah. All right. Any other final comments? All right. Well, thank you all for coming today and presenting to us. And we really are looking forward to having another kind of partner webinar, so we can kind of come and share with your group. And maybe maybe I can work with Ed ahead of time, and we can even come up with some questions that we can think of to kind of stimulate discussion at the end. So.
Sure. Sounds good.
Right. All right. Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
for having us.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.